I think that this is what happens in a roadrunner culture, is that speed becomes an end in itself. Busy becomes the badge of honor, right? It's about being busy rather than what you're doing with all that time and all that busyness. It's very true. We've got the equation completely back to front. It should much more be about what we want to do, what means something, what puts real fire in your belly and is going to make your heart sing when you look back from your deathbed 30, 40, 50 years from now. Those are things that we should be investing our time, attention, energy, and love in, and letting everything else go and giving our full time to the things that really matter and making sure we do them at the right speed. But of course, that's the slow philosophy in a nutshell.
The Vidal Speaks podcast.
Episode 76, Carl Honoré, Living Slow, Powering Forward by Slowing Down. Welcome to Vidal Speaks. My name is Deborah Vidal, former 11-year LPGA golf pro turned classical homeopath, certified plant-based nutritionist, and wellness coach. Each week here on Vidal Speaks, we bring you knowledge, inspiration, or natural remedies to help you take charge of your health and feel your best. I believe health is freedom and knowledge is power, so tuning in each week will give you the power to take steps towards freeing yourself from the chains that hold you back from having the energy to do all you want in life. No matter where you are in your journey of wellness, Vidal Speaks can help. I promise. Welcome back, my friends. How are you today? I hope you're having a nice day and you're doing something you love and not feeling too stressed out. But if by chance you've been going through some months of feeling like you're just doing too much or you have too much on your plate, then today's show is really going to help you put things into perspective. My guest is Carl Honoré, who is known as the Slow Living Guru. Have you heard of the slow movement or slow living? There's so many people now exploring this, but Carl is really one of the people that made teaching this movement his life work. Please check out his TED Talk, which you'll find the link in my show notes, of course, because he had 2 million views on that TED Talk. And when somebody gets that many views, it means people are interested or looking to change something in their life. Speed is a bit addictive to many people, and speed's really a kind of word that we'd use to describe modern times, wouldn't we? That's the way most all of us have been living. Anything fast was good. I remember speed reading courses, speed walking, speed golf was even invented, and everybody who's looking for a fast fix, right? That's the same thing. Or a fast meal. Yes, speed is the thing of the modern century. But have you ever stopped to think what speed might be actually doing to the quality of our lives? What about our children's lives? Doing something fast is always something that seems to get complimented. But then, are we rewarding time over quality? Soon we seem to be producing at such a speed that all joy is gone. And then, of course, burnout sets in, and we lost the beautiful possibility of the day. Now we have to be realistic, especially those of us who must work for a living and need an income to pay our bills. At least here in America, where people work long hours, often have 2 jobs, get paid so little, have huge health insurance bills, and are stressed out as they can't afford a vacation in so many years. It seems there's no way we can slow down. But that's not true, you guys. There's still many ways to make the best use of the time that you do have. After today's show, I hope it'll get you thinking about the balance of fast and slow in your life and quality over quantity. This is really a must. We have to learn to put down our phones and our computers and find time to do something we love or spend time with those we love. Of course, life is not always something that just runs smoothly. Some periods of stress will make us feel we can't make it through and we just have to speed up to get everything done. And then there's other times that are calmer and they allow us the chance to really take time and take care of our slow things that are so rich in quality. Those are the things that feed our soul. But in the end, it's always about balance, right? Sadly, I think the scales are tipped so far onto the speed side in life, at least for most Americans that I know, and I'm sure it's like that all over the world. We need to learn to bring that balance back. I'm super excited for you guys to hear Carl Honoré. He has some great tips and he'll make you think a lot. It just makes a lot of sense. So before I take any more of your time, I'm going to slow down and introduce Carl and tell you a little bit about him now, okay? Carl Honoré is an award-winning writer, broadcaster, and TED speaker. He is the global spokesman for the slow movement. He travels the world to teach individuals and organizations how to power forward by slowing down. Whether running small workshops or speaking to thousands from the stage, Carl is dynamic, inspiring, insightful, and funny. Carl was featured in a series for BBC Radio called The Slow Coach, in which he helped frazzled, overscheduled Britons slow down. He presented a TV show called Frantic Family Rescue, where he did the same for families in Australia. He hosts a podcast called The Slow Revolution, and his TED Talk on the benefits of slowing down has been viewed 2.3 million times. Before spearheading the slow movement, Carl spent a decade working as a journalist. He covered Europe and South America for The Economist, Observer, Miami Herald, Houston Chronicle, Time, National Post, and other publications. His first book, In Praise of Slow, examines our compulsion to hurry and chronicles a global trend toward putting on the brakes. His second book, Under Pressure, explores the good, the bad, and the ugly of modern child rearing and offers a blueprint for change. It was hailed by Time as a gospel of the slow parenting movement. Carl's latest book, The Slow Fix, explores how to tackle complex problems in every walk of life, from health and relationships to business and politics, without falling for the superficial, short-term quick fixes. Translated into 35 languages, his books have landed on bestseller lists in many countries. Carl recently joined the advisory board of Jack Media, which makes a slow messaging app. He also sits on the board of trustees of Hewitt School in New York City. He lives in London with his wife and 2 children. In his spare time, he plays slow sports like hockey and squash. All right, you guys, relax. Slow down. Don't do anything too hectic. Just sit there and listen to Carl give you some unbelievable great advice on how to power forward with slow living. Here we go. Hi, Carl. I know you're the slow movement guru, and boy, do I need to speak to you today because I want to learn how to slow down and get more done. So thanks for being on the Vidal Speaks podcast and welcome.
Good to be with you. You've come to the right place.
Great. So let's just start by defining what is the slow movement.
Well, it's a reaction against the culture of the moment, which is very much about doing everything as fast as possible. The virus of hurry has infected every corner of our lives, and every moment of the day feels like a race against the clock. And the slow movement is really about saying that there are times to be fast and times to be slow. It's not anti-speed, right? I need to make it very clear up front that I am not an extremist or a fundamentalist of slowness. I love speed, right? Faster is often better, and we all know that. I live in London, you live in LA, and we both know that fast is often good, but not always. And that's the key here, because slow with a capital S, you talk about the slow philosophy, slow revolution, slow movement, is about doing things at the right speed. Sometimes fast, sometimes slow, and all those different tempos in between. And in some ways, I think it's about more than just pace. It's a frame of mind or a state of being. It's about quality over quantity. It's about doing things mindfully, being present and in the moment, trying to do things not as fast as possible, but as well as possible. And once you take that slow chip, slip it inside your head, you realize that it can transform everything you do, from the way you work to the way you think, the way you make love, raise your children, eat, exercise, everything.
Yeah, it's really interesting the way you said that, because first of all, sometimes it is easier to define something by what it is not, because I'm a homeopath and a lot of people would ask me what homeopathy is, and I could get the point across faster telling them first what it's not, because most people think it's herbs or something else. But also what's interesting about what you just said is really life is always about a balance, isn't it? If you went everything slow, slow all day long, first of all, you wouldn't get anything done, and it would be the snail movement, right? Not the slow movement. So that's actually really good. I like that. I already feel better. Like, phew, I can do some things fast. Okay, cool. Because I too am a fast person, but I really like to enjoy life, and I really like to do a good job. I like to do the best I can at everything. And if somebody asks me for help, then I like to be there. So now it makes a lot more sense when you say about the balance between slow and fast and quality over quantity. So I like that.
And you do have to start off, I think, in this roadrunner world by defining slow by what it's not, in a sense, because everything around us is so fast. And one of the upshots of this fast forward culture is that we've created such a deep and abiding taboo against the very idea of slowness, or that slow has become a 4-letter word. It's a dirty word in our culture, right? It's a byword for lazy, stupid, unmodern, unproductive, for roadkill, right?
Yeah.
And I think this taboo means that even when, like you can feel that, yeah, I want to go fast sometimes, but part of me wouldn't mind putting on the brakes at other moments. Even when we feel that, and we can sense in our bones it'd be good for us to put on the brakes sometimes, we don't do it because of that taboo. We feel ashamed. We feel afraid, we feel guilty, and so we just carry on going fast. So I think a big part of talking about slowing down is about unpacking the language around it, the attitudes that are so deeply ingrained against the notion itself of putting on the brakes every once in a while. That it's a process. You don't convince people or persuade them to slow down by snapping your fingers. You've got to bring them along, and as baby steps, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, and I think sadly, sometimes people think ambition and success is about how much you get done and not at the quality at which you got it done. And even companies, you look at companies, the way they're running, or just, whether really large or really small. I mean, I always prefer to support people who do the right thing, who treat their employees right, who are bringing in people to help them be healthier, or exercise, or teach them things while they're at work, or give them time. Because, if you hate your job, I mean, how good a job are you really going to do? So
exactly.
It's just for the guy at the top to make more money and drive his workers like slaves, and it doesn't really produce, even though he might end up feeling like he's being more productive because he's getting all this, what he thinks is output. I'm sure that we'll get into this later about the stats of this. I'm sure it's not right, but it doesn't even feel right, to see someone do it.
Exactly. And I think that we're inching and slouching even towards a turning point in our history where for a long time, it didn't feel right, but people just carried on doing it anyway because the push culturally, socially, all around us was more, faster, faster, faster. And it was so hard to put your head above the parapet and say, hang on a minute here. If I had a little bit of autonomy over my own time and a little bit of freedom to slow down when it makes sense for me personally, then not only would I be better in myself, healthy, a better version of myself, I'd actually be a better employee. I would be more productive and more creative. And people have found that really, really hard to do. But I do think, and I'm more optimistic now about the prospects for the slow movement than I was when I first wrote my book those years ago, that we are coming to one of those inflection points where it's now admissible to say, hang on, this is just nuts, right? Faster isn't always better, even in the workplace. And I'll just give you one example that underscores how far the tectonic plates are shifting and how far the debate is moving in the direction of slow. Is that a little while ago, the Economist magazine published a survey looking at the pace in the modern workplace. And they came to the conclusion that some things have sped up, especially information technology and the data that's coming at us from every side all the time. That's faster, but many other things hadn't. And the reason being that essentially there are limits to how fast business can go. And also human beings are just slow, right? We're not having a great evolutionary leap forward. We're just as slow. And we need the same amount of slowness as we did 50 years ago, before the internet.
Yeah.
And the conclusion of this piece from the Economist magazine was a 2-line paragraph, pithy, very Economist, and it said simply, forget frantic acceleration. Mastering the clock of business means knowing when to be fast and when to be slow.
Wow.
And there it is, a perfect summation of the slow philosophy. And that's the Economist magazine putting that out there. It's not Buddhist Monthly. It's not Acupuncture Weekly.
Wow.
It's not a homeopathy journal either. It is the in-house Bible of global capitalism, of the fastest people, most entrepreneurial spirits, the more demographic. Those people are increasingly aware that too much is bad for everyone. Too much speed, too much of everything is just counterproductive. And not only are they aware of it, they're actually saying it out loud now and acting on it.
Wow, that's great. And I know you did a TED Talk, and I watched your TED Talk on YouTube, and it has over 2 million views. And I can see why, because, everyone I think knows, everyone in the whole world probably, not just America or LA or London, but I just think people really know that they're just doing too much, and they're just feeling like in this state of, you called it like the virus of hurry. I think that is really so true, and people have so much on their plate. So I can see why your YouTube got so many views. That's great. Can you tell us a little bit about the story? I know it, maybe others that are listening today don't, about what even got you into doing this.
Yeah, I think when you get stuck in Roadrunner mode, it always takes a shock to the system or some kind of wake-up call to make you realize you've forgotten to slow down and that this is taking a real toll on you. And for many people nowadays, that wake-up call comes in the form of an illness. The body one day says, no, I cannot take the pace anymore, and you have a burnout or a heart attack, or you just break down. You can't get out of bed one morning. Or maybe a romantic relationship goes up in smoke because you haven't had the time or the tranquility to listen to the other person or be with them or switch off your iPhone in bed. My wake-up call came when I started reading bedtime stories to my son. And back in those days, I was just incapable of slowing down. So I'd go into his room at the end of the day, sit on the bed with one foot on the floor, and speed read Snow White, right? So I'm skipping lines, paragraphs, whole pages. In fact, I became an expert in what I dubbed the multiple page turn technique, which I think any parent out there, we've all been there, and we wince in recognition. We've all been there, but we all know it doesn't work, right? Because our kids know these stories back to front. So my son would always catch me out. He'd say, Daddy, why are there only, 3 dwarves in Snow White tonight? What happened to Grumpy? Because my version of Snow White was so fast, it was just absurd. And I realized it was wrong, but I just couldn't stop myself. I was just too fast. And then I had the wake up moment came when I found myself flirting with buying a book I'd heard about called The 1 Minute Bedtime Story. So Snow White, Hans Christian Andersen, all those great children's tales boiled down into 60 seconds.
Looking for the faster version.
Exactly. And I do remember my first reaction very clearly. I can feel it now in my gut. I thought, wow, what a wonderful idea. I need that book now, right? From Amazon, drone delivery. But then I had a second reaction, which was really very different. I thought, whoa, has it come to this? Am I really in such a hurry? I'm prepared to fob off my little boy with a soundbite at the end of the day instead of a story. And that was the moment when I just pushed pause and said, I cannot carry on like this. I've become a parody of myself. I am spinning out of control. And that was when I started investigating not only my own addiction to speed, but also the bigger picture and traveling around the world and uncovering this new way of thinking about time, this what eventually came to be called the slow movement.
Wow. And, it's just even getting more challenging because with iPhones and email and internet, we can do so many more things in a day if we allow ourselves. So I just wonder, do you think that was kind of the start of what made everyone get into this hurried craze?
I think it's what's helped tip us into the moment when slow can really get traction. If you go back historically, we've been on an upward curve of acceleration for a long time. You could go back as far as the arrival of clocks at medieval town squares. Once people started measuring time, parceling it up into minutes and seconds, then they began to hurry. They had a schedule. Suddenly there were deadlines, and people began moving more quickly and worrying about how to use their time and how to squeeze more and more into each minute and every hour. So that goes back hundreds of years. You come into the Industrial Revolution. Machines allow us to do things faster and faster. And they also link productivity, how much you do, with how much you earn, right? How many widgets you can churn out of a factory. The more you churn out per second, the more money you make. So that whole kind of time is money thing became part of our social fabric and our cultural thinking. Then you get into the 20th century and you've got two things going on. I think originally you've got the consumer culture comes along and suddenly the whole world is this incredible smorgasbord or buffet of things to do and to consume and experience, and we want to have it all, right? So we end up rushing but we end up hurrying it all because that's what having it all ends up meaning. And then, as you say, in the last 10 years or so with the explosion of social media, we're now find ourselves in a world where we really literally can do, consume, buy, publish, just do anything 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, almost anywhere on Earth. And because the natural human instinct is to want to have it all, is not to switch off, but just to keep on going. I think of it as a little bit like a parallel with the obesity epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
Our bodies were built and were forged in an evolutionary time of famine. There was scarcity. There was very little food around. And so once we saw food, we just went for it. We dug in and ate ourselves sick, because you never knew, you might be 3 or 4 days before you ate again or ate a decent meal back on the savannah in Africa. Nowadays, when you're surrounded by, Cocoa Pops and Krispy Kreme donuts at every turn, we still have the same instinct, which is just to keep on eating. So even when we don't need to eat anymore, we keep on gorging. And I think there's a really clear parallel with social media, which is that we're social creatures. We live for social connection, and we get a little dopamine squirt every time there's a little message pings in from WhatsApp or Facebook. And what do we do in a time before where we didn't have all these social electronic connections? We could have gone a long time without actually seeing anyone or making the connection, but now it's all around us, and we do the same thing as we do with the food. We just don't stop. We keep going and going. So I think all of us will recognize that scenario where you think, oh, you know what, I'll check my email, or I'll see what's happening on Instagram. You hop on and you're there 90 minutes later, right? You think, what happened?
Yeah.
Right? And I think something really at a deep, deep cerebral, cellular, evolutionary level is going against us there, is conspiring against us, pushing us into doing things faster. So it does mean that it's hard to come off that treadmill of consumption and being always on. But it doesn't mean it's impossible, because we also have a really good brain. That's the other joyous outcome of evolution. And we are able to overcome some of those instincts. And we can start to embrace a life which is about less and slower in order to get to that magic word, which is better.
Yeah, and anything that does produce a kind of dopamine hit is something that takes some work. It's not just going to happen by itself, because it's kind of almost becomes like a drug. And they did a show here in America that it was on 60 Minutes, where they actually showed that these guys that produce these apps, I shouldn't say guys, because it's when these people that produce these apps are actually programming in that idea of dopamine hits. And now they've been able to prove that you just hear that little ping of your email or your text. And the guy that was the host of the show, he had his phone on the floor while they were doing the interview. And he said, I just heard the ping on my phone, and I'm feeling very nervous that I can't pick it up and see who's texting me. And it's crazy though, but it's like that. And the other sad part about it is, especially for younger people, because it's the way of communication for them now is like texting. Unlike when I was a kid, you wrote a birthday card, you had your mom take you to the post office and you put it in the mail. I mean, it was so much work but you made a nice effort. Then you really feel like you've wished somebody a happy birthday. But today it's just like, oh, happy birthday, or Facebook will tell you it's so-and-so's birthday today. Oh, okay, happy birthday. And even dating, I feel like they're losing the connection with each other, and it's so easy to get lost in the social media thing. So not only are we able to hurry and get so many more things done at the same time, it's so lousy of a quality.
Exactly. Facebook's a good example, isn't it? Or any social media. You look, people have got 921 friends on Facebook, but when was the last time they spent a whole afternoon just walking around a park chatting to one of those people?
Yeah.
It's that old equation of quality versus quantity, and social media is all about quantity. Now, I'm certainly not a Luddite. I use social media. I think the gadgets are great. I wouldn't want to give any of them up, but I just think you have to use them judiciously and use that little red button that says off. You need to have the right balance between real world, slow, analog human connections and the faster stuff that can go alongside it and enrich it. The two can enrich each other if you have the right balance. But I do think that a lot of people, and it's not just young people, I think there's often a tendency to think this is a problem of millennials. I think often it's just a character problem. Some people are more prone to fall into being online all the time. And I think of my mom, who's in her, she's 76, and she is one of the worst, iPad addicts I've come across. She comes to visit us, and my teenage kids are on her case to switch off and leave the thing to one side. So I don't think it's just a kind of young, old, millennial, boomer, Gen X type thing. I think that we can all fall into it, and some of us find it easier to resist than others. But the good news, in my view, is that, again, even within that younger cohort, which I do think, as a general rule, you're right, that tech thing where they've grown up with it is much more present in their lives in the way they interact. Even they're starting to come around to the idea that it might make sense to have real human slow connections a bit more than they are at the moment. So one example is that, I don't know if you've heard of this social ritual that's come up called stacking. Is it ring about? It's when young people go out for a Starbucks or a sushi or whatever, or a sandwich, or they're just sitting around a table, and everybody stacks their phone up in the middle of the table, and whoever grabs the phone first to check WhatsApp or Snapchat or whatever pays the bill for everybody at the table.
Wow.
So it's just a nifty way of saying, here we are together in the real world, offline. We have this moment together. We will never have this moment again. Why spoil it by multitasking, by being distracted, by trying to be in other moments elsewhere via the web? And that's the fact that ritual, that stacking thing, has not been imposed by the baby boomer generation or burned out 50-something saying, oh, we've had enough of all this Facebook nonsense. It's actually bubbling up from below. It's young people themselves who are saying, oh, okay, I love Snapchat. Even Tinder can be a lot of fun sometimes, but it's just crazy. I need sometimes just to sit and listen and be heard and be present completely with someone who's completely present with me. So I think we shouldn't give up hope. I do think that all generations together, we're starting now to rewrite the rule book and to come up with new social norms and protocols and just rules of daily life for when to use our gadgets, when to switch them off, when to have them present, when to have them hidden. And it takes time. It takes time to work these things out. But the hunger for that new way of doing it, that more balanced approach to tech is definitely there. And people are already taking fun and exciting steps to make it real.
And when things like that happen, it's usually because something has gotten way out of balance. So then some new game or technology gets, kind of invented to prevent that from happening. Because I was at a store the other day and there were 4 tables outside, little tables. There were 3 couples, maybe in their 20s, maybe 30, and maybe there was one other table that had 4 people there. And as I was standing there, I was waiting for this guy to get something for me. And I looked over and I go, wow, every one of them are on their phone. I mean, that's crazy. If they were friends or dates but they weren't interacting. So I'm gonna start going, hey, do you guys know about stacking?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you need to become the poster girl for stacking out there in the West.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
But the funny thing is, if you look at this survey of opinions and polls they do of the demographic you've described there, when they get asked, what's the thing you find most irritating on a date or in a romantic partner? It's always the same these days. It's always looking at his or her phone, checking email, checking. It's the thing they all find really annoying. But then, as you say, you can very easily walk to a cafe here in London as well and see pretty much everybody still looking at their phone. So, we have a long way to go, but the debate is alive, and the argument is very clear in which direction it needs to go. And as I say, with things like stacking, we're already taking some steps. So I'll just toss out another example I came across recently. I do a lot of work with schools, and I was at a school in the west of England recently, and some of the 13-year-old girls came up to me afterwards and said, we've among ourselves, we've worked out a way of controlling our phone use because we were realizing it was getting out of hand. We just weren't able to concentrate, get our homework done properly. So every evening they set aside a certain slot of time. It might be 2-3 hours when everybody within their social circle takes their phone, switches it off, and puts it out of the bedroom. No social media for whatever the time they've agreed, and everybody does their homework, and then they go back on Snapchat and so on, right? Mm-hmm. And they said it's such a relief. They said, because before we were just constant, it was always there, it was always pinging. You'd be halfway through a paragraph in an English paper on Jane Austen, and suddenly you're getting a funny photo with a cute emoji from a friend across town, and it's just impossible to focus. And now they say, now we get our homework done in half the time. We get it done a lot. We get it done a lot better, and we enjoy our social media more because it's not constant. It's something we can look forward to. We shift back and forth away from it. We come back to it. And that's 13-year-old girls coming to that conclusion themselves. Again, it wasn't the staff at the school. It wasn't the principal saying, these are the things you ought to do. Here are some tablets of stone to get more out of your gadgets. That was the girls themselves coming up with these solutions for living better, living slow, I would say. That's a very slow way of using your technology, switching it off, shifting gears, and that to me makes me feel so optimistic. I think we will come out of this moment of madness because it really is madness, and we know it. Yeah,
great. And I know your first book, Praise of Slowness, you talk so much about this hurry. And can you single it down to what's the major cause of why people are so hurried?
I suppose if you wanted to really boil it down to one thing, I suppose it could be boiled down to one word, which is fear. But it's different kinds of fear. It's the fear of missing out. It's the fear of being left behind. It's the fear of being scorned and made fun of by other people who are doing things faster. It's the fear of being alone with yourself, because that's another thing that slowing down implies. Because often people go fast and make themselves busy because they don't want to confront themselves. They don't want to look inside.
For sure.
And face up to what's really going on in their lives. It's much easier just to fill up your schedule with stuff, distraction, and keep your eye on your phone. As soon as an uncomfortable, unnerving thought bubbles up, it's much easier just to reach for your phone and see what's happening on Twitter. So I think you could boil it down to fear, but of course that fear expresses itself in lots of different ways. The pressures in the workplace force us to go faster than we want to, and even than we should. The technology I've already talked about, the consumer culture, all these things. I think there's a big cocktail, but maybe if you stripped it all away, you'd come down to one emotion, and that emotion might just be fear.
Interesting. And usually when you're in a hurry like that, you're just focused on, I was a professional golfer on the LPGA for 11 years. And we're so trained as professional athletes in golf, especially because it's a slow sport. But sometimes your mind can be going very fast, and you would know it but if you're out in the gallery looking in, because you're walking down the fairway, the ball's not moving until you get there. You have all this time to put negative thoughts into your mind because the ball's sitting still. But you have to really train your mind to stay always in the present, like this new wave of being mindfulness, this mindfulness wave, right? Because when you think out in the future, you think out in the past as a golfer, that's only going to ruin your score because you're not in the moment. But that's the case for life. And so we check these things off our list when we're in this hurry. But in the end, the goal has only become to get one more check mark on the list, and there's no enjoyment along the way. It's so sad. It's just,
I think that's very true. I think that this is what happens in a roadrunner culture, is that speed becomes an end in itself. Busy becomes the badge of honor, right? It's about being busy rather than what you're doing with all that time and all that busyness.
Yeah.
It's very true. We've got the equation completely back to front. It should much more be about what we want to do, what means something, what puts real fire in your belly and is going to make your heart sing when you look back from your deathbed 30, 40, 50 years from now. Those are things that we should be investing our time, attention, energy, and love in, and letting everything else go and giving our full time and doing those to the things that really matter, and making sure we do them at the right speed. But of course, that's the slow philosophy in a nutshell, but it's often the way that very few of us live. I like the fact you brought up golf, because I always think that golf gets a bad name, and in fact it's under pressure, isn't it? And there's a pressure within the golfing world to try and speed it up. It's not fast enough for the modern consumer, right. The modern TV viewer. So, and you see the same thing with cricket, the English sport, which has been spread over 3, 4, 5 days. They've now got it down to a day. They can do it even shorter, and it's all about this idea that somehow they're constantly chasing this holy grail of making the thing faster, because that automatically means making it better. And I just don't think that's the case. I mean, some sports could probably do with a little speeding up. Some could probably do with a little slowing down. But I just think the default setting in our culture is always to look at a sport and think, how do we make this better? Let's speed it up, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the glories of golf, and I play golf myself, obviously not as well as you have or do, but is that it does force you, in a sense, to be still, to find a kind of stillness that we very rarely find in the hurly-burly of daily life, because if you start letting your mind rev at, several thousand RPMs and you get very worked up, you're going to miss that putt, right? You're going to miss that putt.
Exactly.
You need to find a kind of calm and a stillness and a slowness, really. You need to slow things down. You literally need to slow down your heart rate. All that stuff needs to slow down in order to deliver when you step up to the plate. And I think for that reason, I think golf is a very good, can be a very good antidote.
Well, that's, exactly what I was going to say, because, there's different kind of personalities. You come into the world and you're kind of either a doer or just this kind of naturally slow person, because there's people on the tour like Freddie Couples, who is very naturally slow and it's just his pace. And so golf was a great sport for him because it's very natural for him to just kind of walk along and let it all happen. And then you take someone like me who was more, not so much impatient, but just I was just faster. And golf for me was a big challenge, learning to slow down. Like the person I'm playing with, if they were taking too much time, I'm like, oh, hit the ball. Jeez, what's taking her so long? Hit the ball. I would tell my caddy, but you do this day in and day out, and pretty soon you learn. So for me, it was more of an antidote, but it was also like my teacher, like that story that you said about your son. I learned what's the rush? Just take your time, take a breath, focus on the moment now. What difference does it make? But doing this for a living, it really helped me learn to stay in the present, because in addition to realizing that speed only ruins your score, but also that you just need to be in the moment to produce your best swing, because your best swing will produce your best result. You can't even be focused on the result. So all this for me was kind of a way to bring me into balance, because I started out not really saying golf was not a natural sport for me if you're matching the speed of golf to who I was. But in the end, it was probably the best sport I could have ever played, because it gave me such a gift that I can use in my life.
It is a gift. And the word that kept coming to my mind as I heard you speak there was retraining. I mean, it's a kind of resetting. It's like a reboot of the self. And I always say, when people say to me, how do I start slowing down? How do I conquer that hair reflex? How do I find my inner tortoise, if you like? One of the things I always say is try and find some kind of activity that forces you by its very nature to slow down, that inoculates you and vaccinates you against the virus of hurry and retrains you, your both body and mind, to feel comfortable with and actually to enjoy slowing down, so that you are into a kind of state of flow and do that, whatever that thing is better. So we've talked about golf, but that activity could be anything from knitting to yoga to gardening to cooking, or just things that have natural speed bumps in them, that if you start going too fast, it's all going to fall apart on you. Right? And I think it's so useful to have those incorporated into a daily routine.
And I think that's why stuff like yoga is so important and popular, exactly for the reason you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, the flip side of that is that just as we try and speed up golf, we try and speed up yoga. So there's a gym not far from my house in London now, which offers an evening course in speed yoga. Right?
Oh, God.
I wish it didn't exist, but it does. It's for time-starved professionals. They want to salute the sun, bend their bodies into the lotus position, but they find yoga too slow, so they want to do it instead of an hour. They want to do it in 10 minutes.
Wow.
Which is slightly missing the point.
Yeah. Too bad.
That's where we are now, is that we take things that are by their very nature slow, that are designed to shift us into a lower gear. We try and accelerate them. So in fact, there's another example that comes to mind now. It's even more absurd than speed yoga. Is that a little while ago, a friend of mine in the United States got invited to a drive-through funeral. And you just think, how can that even exist?
Drive-through funeral.
Not.
My God.
The church places the coffin at the entrance, sort of in the driveway area, and the mourners arrive by car, and they say farewell to a loved one through a pane of glass. Right?
Oh my God.
It's like picking up a Big Mac at a drive-through McDonald's.
Jeez.
And you think, when we've got to the stage where we're even speeding up that most sacred and solemn moment, which is when you say farewell to a loved one, we're trying to speed that up to that. We have lost the plot, right?
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. But Carl, one of the things, and I know I live in LA and you live in London, and it's probably the case in all these big cities like New York, Chicago, Tokyo, all these cities everywhere around the world. People are really busy and times are really hard. Not everyone gets paid a good amount of money that they feel that they can slow down, because it's getting to the point where some people have to have 2 jobs now. So what do people do when they're in this position where they feel like their life has become all about work just to make ends meet? I mean, you still need to have this balance, because you can't live like that and be healthy. But do you have any advice?
Yeah, I think there are some bigger questions that you've touched on there that we need to be addressing collectively. How jobs look, how much people earn, cost of living, housing, debt. These are big questions. These are macro questions, right?
Right.
Which if you're in dire straits or feeling like your day is just all over you, that you can't really be dealing with that. You've got to make small changes on the micro level personally. So I think very often we think we can't make any changes, but more often than not we can if we just sort of push pause and take a moment just to look at how we're using our time through the week, how we're using our technology, what we're doing in the spare moments when we do actually have control over our time. What are we doing in those moments? Are we actually getting off the treadmill and going for a walk without our phone, or are we immediately sitting down in front of the computer or TV? Or are we eating our food in front of the internet, or are we having a meal with our family or a partner around the table, just a conversation, maybe just a 20-minute meal. It doesn't have to be a sort of home-cooked 9-course, 4-hour banquet, right? It could just be small little changes, I think, that can make a big difference. And something like, we talked about meditation. Obviously, the longer you meditate, the better. But even just taking a few minutes, start off with a minute of just pausing. Maybe you're on the bus on the way to work and you feel like everything in your body and mind is racing like crazy. Just put everything down, close your eyes, and take a few deep breaths, for a minute or so. That will have a physical effect and a slowing effect and a calming effect. It's not going to sort out, your family budget or anything. And of course, as I say, these are bigger macro problems that probably are best dealt with in another show. But in the here and now for an individual, I think it's just often about little changes, little hacks, and also asking what's really important. Sometimes we find ourselves working these long hours without ever asking why. Why are we doing it? Are we doing it to please our parents because we think we need to buy a bigger car? Do we need that bigger car? Is there another way of living with maybe less? Not everybody can, but many, many people who are rushing around complaining about how busy and overworked they are could live with less. Yeah. Maybe that's a moment to have that conversation with yourself and say, what's really important to me? Is it having a bit more time to read a bedtime story to my children without skipping pages? Or do I really feel I need to be back down at the coalface to make another, a bit more money each month? These are all, there's no universal prescription. There's no absolute recipe for everybody to slow down. But I think we can all find little moments, where we switch off, where we try and do something more slowly, where we avoid multitasking, where we eat with our mind present, where we talk to people in person rather than trying to do it always online. All these little changes I think can add up to quite a big difference.
Yeah, because finding little places you can have quality, and even in what we eat, because I think people don't realize how they are spending their dollar. And sadly, because of how we subsidize all the junk food and the crap food, so people can afford, to go eat a fast food meal for less than they can have a head of broccoli, which is sad. But still, there's a lot of ways. I'm a plant-based vegan, and you can eat rice and beans, and you can cook it yourself and eat it with your family. And there's ways that people need to take a look. Sometimes they're grabbing a Starbucks every day to work, and they don't realize what that adds up to. So I think, like you said, there's probably a bigger category of people that are spending time and money on things that they could make a change on and add a lot of quality to their life, including the food they eat. Because as a homeopath, I see so many sick people over the years, and honestly, most of them are stressed. They sleep too little. They eat out all the time, mostly fast food. They've got no time to cook. They make really poor decisions because they're tired and feeling under pressure. And I look at them and I think, wow, they don't look like they're having any fun in life. It's no surprise they're sick. But sometimes I would ask my patients, I'd say, if you could live a fantasy life, what would your life look like? And it was unbelievable how the story was almost opposite of where they were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
sad.
I think it is sad. And I think it's not uncommon either, is it, that people just get stuck in a way of being, and it's hard to break out of. It's easier to put your head down and just keep going until you crash. In some ways, it's easier, I think, than stopping and confronting all of the doubts and skepticism of people around you and all your expectations you had, maybe having to change. That's a lot of emotional heavy lifting. That it's incredibly useful to do, and it will lead to a much better life. But it can be scary, I think, for people. Like I was talking earlier about what drives this fast, busy culture. It's often fear. It's often the fear of pushing pause, like you said there, and doing that thought experiment and asking yourself, what would be my ideal life? What really, really matters to me? And how can I change the way I'm living now to get closer to that ideal? That's can be exhilarating and freeing
Yeah.
in a very profound way, but can also be terrifying, which I think explains why a lot of people feel handcuffed and unable to do it. But, the more people like you, me, who talk about these things, and the more people do it, the easier it becomes. It becomes more permissible to say, you know what, there is another way. There are other priorities. There's a better way of being in the world. And, it takes imagination, it takes creativity, it takes courage, and it takes discipline, because in a world that rewards one way of being, to forge another path is never easy, but it's so worth it.
It's so worth it. And I read in your book when you were talking, and I want to ask you that about how our children are being affected by this life of hurry. But one of the things also that I see and that you wrote about is the quality of how hurry is killing our medicine, because our doctors, I had that experience. Lloyd, my partner, was in this horrible pain some years ago, and we went to the doctor, and they had put him on, they were wanting to put him on all these pain meds, and I was actually crying, and it was a really intense moment. And the doctor looks at his watch and says, I've been here 15 minutes and I get paid 10 minutes with Blue Cross, and I got to go to my... He said that? He said that. And he said, wow. I got to go to my next patient. And I just went like, are you kidding me? Are you really serious? Oh my gosh, that is crazy. And even if they don't say it, that's the truth.
That is the truth. I'm surprised he would say it though. Wow. Yeah, they do. Yes, they do. And that's just, you're talking about the United States. The same thing is here in Britain. We all have that. I think in many countries you get that sense of going to a doctor, and you can feel that he or she is already, they're sitting on the end of the desk, one eye on the clock. You can feel them a little bit fidgety. They don't want to go down paths that may be dead ends, or that maybe don't sort of come out very clearly on the other side swiftly. And it just means that, you get kind of medicine by numbers. And I think that explains why so much of conventional medicine is failing us. Yeah. Especially serious and chronic illnesses.
Yes.
Which simply do not respond to quick fixes. And our conventional medicine is, so much of it is based on quick fixes. Quick diagnosis, quick intervention, and you're off, right? That's it. Sign on the dotted line, go home. and that's just doesn't work, right?
And the doctors that do know, like that have, gone out of their normal training to learn integrative medicine or nutrition or something like that. I mean, how can you tell someone how to change their diet in 10 minutes? I mean, you can't. Yeah. So they're all the doctors that are spending an hour with their client and finding a different way, either sadly not to take insurance or to do something else, because they also can't, make a living doing it. So it's kind of in a transition period, because they're realizing that that's failing. Some doctors are really trying to do it a different way and get integrative training so that they can kind of really help these chronic diseases, because they're not being helped by just steroids and drugs and, fast pharmaceutical fixes. That just doesn't work. And people are realizing that. And that's why alternative medicine is growing so much. Yeah. But it really is, and in the U.S., it's really at a crisis point, our medicine. And I think this is a big reason why it's just so in a hurry. But I'm sure it's the same in many countries around the world. But tell us now about our children. Like, how are they being directly affected by their parents being in this hurry stage?
Well, I think that kids now, it's got so fast. They come out of the womb and they hit the ground running, right? It's Baby Einstein DVDs, baby sign language classes, baby goes pro sports clinics, Moses, Mandarin lessons in the Moses basket. And it just goes on with these endless extracurriculars and tight schedules and education systems that have become high pressure assembly lines where kids are stuffed with academics younger and younger. And it just goes on and on and on. And I think increasingly we're starting to see the system falling apart at the seams, because if you think of the time, money, and energy that we're investing in the next generation, and how fast we're pushing them, we should, in theory, if we believe in the faster is better, more is better philosophy, we should be witnessing the emergence of the happiest, healthiest, most well-adjusted generation of kids the world has ever seen. But we all know that's not what's happening out there. You just need to pick up a newspaper or go to a hospital, and you see that kids are breaking down emotionally in record numbers. Child depression, anxiety, self-harm, eating disorders, these things are all going through the roof. They're having physical problems. We're raising the fattest generation of kids the world's ever seen. Athletic kids are suffering from serious sports injuries at younger and younger ages because we professionalize and over-intensified sports. Yeah. And another thing you see is, of course, that kids who find themselves on this go fast treadmill, never have a moment to themselves to look into themselves and work out who they are and what they want to be in the world and how to stand on their own 2 feet. So when it comes time for them to flee the nest and go to college or go wherever, they are just not able. They don't have the resilience to cope. So colleges and universities around the world are reporting that students in first year, freshers or freshmen are going to pieces in record numbers. It's just it's just too much. And I think more and more people are realizing that this is folly. I find that I do a lot of speaking in schools, and I tell you, the first member of staff who always pulls me aside to tell me what's going on and to share the stories is always a school nurse. Right? I think that's very revealing. And they always say the same thing. They say, I haven't even got enough room in my schedule to look at the kids who are suffering from stress overload, who have gastric problems, who are having panic attacks in exams, who aren't sleeping enough, all this stuff. And all the things I'm saying, in a way, are echo in the adults and the parents. Because I think any society, we all end up with the childhood that reflects that society's weaknesses and strengths and hang-ups and neuroses. And if we as parents, or we as adults in general, are over-caffeinated, overstressed, underslept, overwired, our kids are ending up in the same boat and paying, I think, a pretty heavy price for it. But that's the downside. Of course, there is a big push now to bring, it's a whole slow education movement, slow parenting. I mentioned those 13-year-old girls coming up with their own solution to switching down the technology, dialing down some of the pressure and speed in order to focus on their homework. That's the tip of the iceberg. There are many afoot, whole schools rethinking how technology is used, towns that are cutting back on extracurriculars together, all kinds of things. As people say, this is too much. Kids actually need slowness. They need it as much, maybe even more than grown-ups do, because it's actually those moments of unstructured time, of unhurried time, of boredom even, right? This is the thing. You're also afraid of boredom nowadays, but throughout human history, when a child came to a parent and said, "I'm bored," that was the child's problem, right? I'm sure you'll remember. I'm certainly from my generation. I'm in my 40s. You said you were bored to your mom. She'd say, "Too bad. That's go outside and find someone to play with." Or they would use that immortal phrase. They'd say, "Use your imagination." Now a child says to a parent, "I'm bored," and it's the parent's fault. The parent says, "Oh no, my child is bored. I'm failing as a mother or father. Where's the iPad? Maybe we need another extracurricular in the schedule."
Yeah.
When in fact, no, we don't need that. What we need is to allow the boredom to happen, let the child fall through the boredom, cope with it, get to grips with it, and come out the other side. Because it's in moments of not knowing what's coming next, of feeling a little bit restless, of not being told exactly what to do and how to do it and how fast. It's in those moments that children learn how to think creatively, how to get along with their peers, how to enjoy the moment, how to look into themselves and work out who they are. It's when they learn how to use their imagination. Yeah, all the things that we're constantly telling each other we want for our kids, that business is telling us we want for the next generation, to be creative, to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, to be imaginative, all that stuff. You get that by slowing down, by giving kids slow moments. So, the science is all there, that children need play, they need to rest, they need to have time to process what they've been chewing down at school. They need to slow down. And, the case is very clear for that. And because the case is so clear, and because I think we're seeing so much damage done to this generation, the change is coming. And I mentioned some examples, but, there are many more.
Time to take a break, and please drink a big glass of water, but drink it slowly and do one big slow stretch before you get back to the show. And now I'd like to ask you guys if you've tried any of my favorite products called 100% Pure. They're amazing, and I really want you to try them. Please go to my website and click on that link under the shop page, and it'll take you to their site, and just order a few things. Try one thing. You won't regret it. Their stuff is amazing and very pure, just like the name. Also, I just want to remind you to keep sharing the show. It's growing, and I owe it all to you guys. We have a very long way to go, but we're moving up and up, folks, so thank you. And it seems every day that I hear someone's telling me that so-and-so was just diagnosed with cancer, or someone died at the age of 55, or another young person was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. It's so horrible, and I want you guys to be the experts so you can not only help yourselves and your family, but you can pass it all on and teach others and help others. You know, it will become a movement for all of us to learn about how to heal ourselves. It will, I promise, because medicine is failing in its current model, and people are looking outside of the medical system a lot now. They want answers and non-toxic solutions. So if you know of anyone who's in this position of suffering or just diagnosed with some chronic disease, please send them the Vidal Speaks podcast and have them join us. There's so much to learn. There's so much out there in the world that's interesting. And there's so many wonderful, inspiring stories and people. And we can all have fun learning this together. I'll do my best to keep it coming. It's a lot of hard work, but I need your help. I need reviews, and if you haven't left one, please do so on iTunes. And if you feel inspired, I surely could use donations, as it takes so much to get the show going each week. Anyway, guys, keep up the good work. I love you all. Now let's get back to the show. But I think, too, as you said, because their schedules are becoming so crazy, it's almost like they're on steroids. You know what I mean? It's like hurry on steroids today with what our kids are required to do, especially if they play some kind of sports. I have some kids that I train in golf, and they play volleyball too, so they play two sports. And volleyball alone, oh my gosh, they have practice 5 days a week for 2 hours. They have tournaments every weekend. They go out of town to tournaments, and that's not counting the other sport, and that's not counting that they need to have 3 hours of homework every day. And then that doesn't count that they have birthday parties that they maybe have to try to squeeze in, or some friend times, or some family dinner, or holidays. And I'm thinking, geez.
Or some sleep.
Or, yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. And I think back, I'm one of 5. My mom was like a mom taxi driver, because our sports were practiced maybe once a week, and still my mom had 5 of us all doing different things. But today, just having 2-3 kids and with the schedules that they're doing, and like you said, I'm seeing kids that play golf and their backs are already hurting, and they're in their teens, because they're just like doing so many things at such a level. And I think their stress level is so high, and their adrenals are just so burned out already they don't even realize that it's all they've ever known. It's just really a crazy world.
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, I'm not against organized sports. I did them growing up, and I'm a big sports guy. I love sports. I still play them. But I think you need to have the right balance. You need to be doing a range of sports. You need to be doing them at the kind of probably for many kids a lot less intensity than they're doing. Yeah. And you also need to have room for pickup sports, the informal version of volleyball, the informal version. I grew up playing hockey or soccer or something where there's no coach, there's no adults telling you how to play. You just play, right? And it gives you that freedom to experiment, to run around, to be with your friends, to work out rules, all that stuff, all that social learning, that physical bodily learning that goes on when you play in an unstructured way. You play sports in an unstructured way is so important. But now kids, that's almost been edited out of a lot of kids.
That's sporting. So true, really. I never thought about that, but that's kind of how all my sports were, because our coach was like the boyfriend of one of our teammates, that would kind of come out and organize it and help us. But it wasn't really like today, like with a coach. So most of my sports all my life were kind of like that. And I have a lot of fond memories. I love sports, but today I think, if you love it, it is a grind. So it's a small percentage. And I think they're teaching the kids not to love it eventually.
Yeah, which is why so many of them give up sports, especially girls in their early teens. And the main reason they give is it's just too much pressure. It's not fun. And the one thing sports really ought to be is fun. I mean, all the great sports here, they will all tell you the same thing. I mean, Wayne Gretzky, the great the hockey player, said that's the main. The kids have to have fun. That's the starting point for not just for the kid who's going to get to the NHL. And play pro, but for every kid who's going to carry on playing as long as he or she can through their lives. You got to be fun. And I have friends who got to the NHL, who got to play for the Canadian. I'm Canadian, so for the Canadian national volleyball team. I got friends who played at professional tennis players. But back in those days, when we were growing up in the 80s, they played a lot of their sports formally and in a structured way, but they also had a lot of time for the pickup version, the informal, where we all just played the kids in the neighborhood together. And they all said to me at one point or another, I tell you what, that informal pickup version of my sport, that saved me. Because that was like an escape valve. I could let off the pressure. I could remember why I loved the sport in the first place, right? It wasn't like it wasn't like a job, because that's, I think, what sports has become for a lot of kids when it becomes super specialized and super hurried. It becomes a job or a grind, and it needs to keep that fun alive. And all these friends of mine who went all the way to the top, they always say, it was, you could try a little trick that you wouldn't try when the coach was complaining or pointing to the scoreboard. You could try that little fancy move between your legs with a puck or whatever, or you could just mess around. And that it's through messing around and taking chances, the kind of chances you're less likely to take in a structured environment. If you take them in an unstructured environment, you learn a new trick, you come up with a new skill, and then you take that into the structured game and you're a better player. Right?
Exactly. It's like the creativity.
Exactly. And we haven't talked about that in a full frontal way, but there's such a clear bond between slowness and creativity. Every artist, every scientist throughout history has always known it, that in order to tap into that deeper, richer, more nuanced form of thought, whether it's in the laboratory, the art studio, or in the sports playing field, you have to slow down. You can't be overpressured. You can't have time pressure on you all the time. You need to have fun. You need to be playful, and you need to slow down. And that just applies to every single human endeavor. And we're talking about sports at the moment, but it works right across the board.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what it is, but if you look back at all the great older athletes, I was thinking of Abdul Karim Jabbar, the basketball player. Remember, he had that his own style where he did that like over his head hook with his shot, right? Yeah. And it's like, you think he learned that from a coach in structured situation? No way. You can just see the move, how they did this, like on the courts, these pickup games. You can just see how it develops, and we're taking away so much creativity from this rigid training of just like training, intense hours, making their bodies do movements that are very difficult. I look of what it was like to drive myself. I didn't start playing golf until I was 23 and as a scratch player in a year and on the tour in 3 years. So I trained really hard in a short period of time, and it was a grind. I never lie about it. I say, I was totally burned out when I left. I was sick from the pesticides. I had back issue, and to go that hard and become good at the pace that I did, it was a burnout. And I think if that's what these kids are doing that are 14 right now, that's really sad, because it's only a matter of time when they're not going to have fun anymore. And then they're going to look back and say, man, I gave up my whole life. My whole life to do that.
And you also have to think that if people are in the back of their minds imagining, and a lot of parents maybe are, they may not admit it to themselves, and maybe the kids are too, and maybe not everybody, but I think a lot of people are thinking, well, if I push this that little bit harder, I could make a pro career of this. I mean, the truth is that the number of people who are going to get a pro career out of the sports they're playing is minuscule. I mean, it's vanishingly small, right? So the main thing we should all be betting on is developing a love of the game and an ability to play it, right? The two things said. And if you are going to become a pro, that will happen, and you'll find your way. And some will come to it later, some will come to it earlier. But I think for most people, the top priority should be to enjoy the sport, to learn how to play it with a view to enjoying it and carrying on playing it through your 20s, 30s, 40s. I mean, I'm in my 40s now, and I play hockey a couple times a week. So I love it, right? It's the highlights of my week. And I'm just not so sure if some of the kids I see now in the work I do in schools, the way they talk about sports, they talk about it as a little bit like a chore. And I just feel that was never the way I felt about it then. It's certainly not the way I feel about it now. And that's something I really feel we ought to be addressing in a
I would say that was the case on the tour too. When I worked for the Golf Channel and did TV at the end of my career, I asked a lot of my colleagues, do you really, really love this game? Do you really love it? Or is it just that's the only thing you've known how to do? And most of them couldn't say they love it. It's a grind. It's really hard. It's a real burnout. When you're playing well, of course, we all love it, but you're not on top every week. And I mean,
you mentioned Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I've talked about Wayne Gretzky. I mean, Roger Federer came out, the tennis player, possibly, I think maybe the greatest tennis player ever to pick up a racket.
Right.
And he's had his own children now, and he was doing an interview about the next generation. He said, the one thing I am not going to be I'm never going to be a pushy parent. I'm never going to be a pushy tennis parent because I've seen that do too much harm on the circuit. Kids need to have fun, to enjoy it. They need to be pushed. They need a kick in the backside every once in a while. Of course they do. But what they don't need is what I think a lot of them are getting now, either from coaches or parents or both. It's just that kind of helicopter hovering overhead, constantly pushing them and making them play as though it were a job. Federer is a good example. He didn't really concentrate on tennis, I think, till he was maybe 12 or 13. He played he was a really good soccer player. He played a lot of soccer and loved that sport too. Even thought about trying that instead of tennis. Whereas now someone like Federer would be taken off at the age of 1.5.
Yeah,
forbidden to play any other sport but tennis. Taken off to some clinic somewhere and just trained endlessly round the clock. And does that produce a better Federer? I think there's a serious question mark over that.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. Now, what about countries? Do you know any stats? I found one, but I don't know if it's accurate. But does some country have like the most holidays and kind of is a little bit working less and being more productive than countries that are working hard? Is there any statistics on that?
Yeah, there are a lot of statistics, actually. Certainly when you look at, there are some European countries, if you look at, say, the Nordic countries, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Norway, you could throw the Netherlands in there, Germany. These are countries that work many fewer hours than the United States does, but their economies rank consistently among the most competitive. They have very high rates of productivity. Certainly, even the French, who are famously, laid back and always taking flack from workaholic Americans for being lazy and spending too much time at the dinner table. So, the French, by hour, are actually among the most. I think they may even be the most productive in the world, according to the most recent statistics. So there is a clear limit to what you can squeeze out of a human being, productivity-wise, and you get more creativity, more imagination if people aren't on a kind of crazy, headless chicken treadmill. But also in the medium and longer term, people are less likely to burn out if they've got a bit of holiday time, right? And certainly most of Europe and countries like that would look at the United States and do. I live here and I hear it all the time. Just think, whoa, it's just nuts. I mean, a holiday for an American seems to be a long weekend, right?
Right.
And it just seems insane. It's kind of machine that's just sort of churning up and spitting out human beings. And yeah, of course, there's a lot of, the American economy is very vigorous in a lot of ways, and there's a lot to admire in Silicon Valley and so on. But there are other ways of doing things, right? And there are other priorities. Americans probably certainly have more cars, bigger houses. But is that making them happier?
Yeah,
I'm not convinced that it is, right?
For sure not.
They certainly don't eat as well as people in the rest of the world. I mean, I find it just when I visit the States so hard to find real food. Everything seems to be processed to within an inch of its life. And people in countries in Europe, even in people further down the income scale, are more likely to eat real food.
Yeah.
Than even people higher up the income scale in the U.S. So it's swings and roundabouts. It's a bit here and a bit there. You've got to choose what's important. But I think there's a pretty clear message coming from the data and the stats around the world, which is that slowing down is good for you, and that you will be more productive often by working less. And in fact, you even find some companies in the U.S. wising up to that and starting to force their staff to take some of their vacation time, or nudging them to take holidays when they're not taking them, or getting them to switch off their phones outside the office. So that's even happening in the workaholic U.S. It's not all is lost over there.
Well, I saw that on the chart that I saw, Germany was the country that had the most holidays and kind of worked, I wouldn't say the less, but definitely most time off and less working hours. And I think Mexico was the highest. Where do you say the United States falls? Are they one of the top 5 as far as working hours? Certainly in the developed world, the United States is one of the longest working countries. Absolutely. I think possibly South Korea. It's been a while since I looked this. I think South Korea was right up there. Yeah. But other countries, the other countries that work the really long hours are the really unproductive developing world countries like Mexico and so on, where a lot of time is invested, and it's just, it's just putting in time. Germany is a good example because, as you say, they do work over a year, comparing Germans and Americans. They work many fewer hours than Americans. Yet, Germany is an economic powerhouse. I mean, it's part of the problem of the European economy and the EU zone
imbalance is that Germany is just too successful, right, at exporting. It's one of the greatest export machines the world has ever seen, and yet they have 6, 7, 8 week holidays, right, a year. Vacation time.
Amazing.
And the idea that you have to keep your nose to the grindstone and never take longer than a 3-day or 4-day weekend is clearly not true, because other countries manage to do it and succeed and thrive at the same time.
Well, in America, once you've worked at a company, I think it's like 3 years, you get 2-week vacation. And then if you've been there 10 years, I think you get 3 weeks. And most people, if they did finally get to that point, because nowadays you can't keep a job for 10 years, so you never get that. But if you were to get that, you don't have any money because they're paying you so little that you don't have any money to go anywhere on vacation. Even if it's just yourself and your husband, I mean, forget bringing the kids on a flight somewhere. So a lot of people, like my brother, takes his vacation just staying at home, like he might take it around the week of Christmas or something, because it's just so crazy the way it works here. They're just working people to death, paying them less money. People don't even have time to sleep enough. It's really at its peak. America, I feel like, is what you're talking about at the top of the scale, because it's got to crash because it just doesn't work.
Yeah. I mean, it's unsustainable to have so much money concentrated in so few hands, and to have such, on the face of it, such an immensely wealthy and affluent country, and yet so many people struggling just to make ends meet. So it's just, that can only last for so long. And I think that you see what's happening politically in the United States. I think that's a sign that whatever was holding that system together is cracking. Right?
Yeah.
And we see the same thing here in Europe with the Brexit vote and the rise of right-wing parties, and it's responding to a feeling that the system is rigged, that the system is not working. It's not working for enough people. And one of the prices, or one of the things that people suffer most when the system's not working, is that feeling of no time, that they lose control of their time, they're running, and even when they do get a bit of time, they haven't got any money to make the most of it, or to eat well, or to just go on a simple vacation. So these are, earlier on we were talking about the big macro questions. These are very much a part of this conversation too, about how we slow down, because it's one thing to take all those steps personally in your own life to slow down and make that as good as it can be, but that's not enough. We got to take this slow revolution to its logical conclusion, which is to create just a much better, fairer world where everybody can be ambitious and thrive and at least have a shot at leading the life they want to lead. And really have a reasonable chance of getting there, rather than now where it just feels like so many people are shut out and are never going to do it, are never going to get out of that spiral.
That's so true. And I really hope that, this craziness can just kind of erupt and fall apart. So whatever's going to come to balance that out can begin, because it's really difficult to see in my country how many people are working so hard and such long hours, and most of them don't like their jobs, don't have an enjoyable life, don't take a vacation, aren't healthy. It's just really hard to see. It's hard to watch, and it is the category of people into that group now. Politically, it's getting bigger and bigger, where, they're trying to make the wealthy wealthier and the poor, just the poor group is not even calling it poor anymore. It's like everybody else. So, it used to be like three classes, I guess you could say, but now it's like the top 1% and pretty much everybody else. And to some degree, there's some worse off than others, but everybody is struggling. I don't know anybody in my friend circle that has any savings. I mean, what is the world going to do when these people get old and we have autistic kids growing that take $1 million in their lifetime to need care? I mean, we're not thinking things through. This greed for speed and fast movement and more money is just really damaging on so many levels. But like you said, these are all macro questions that have to be addressed on a global level to really see a change. But what we want to help people with today is to focus on the little things that they can do in their own little environment, in their own world, in their own life, because otherwise you just kind of lose hope.
Yeah, you get lost in the hopelessness of it all, and that whole kind of macro rethink of course, that brings us back to slowness as well, because we have to slow down in order to have that macro debate. The part of the problem is that we're all moving so fast, we're so busy, we're so distracted, we're so focused on trying just to make ends meet or get through the next day that we don't have the time just to sit back and think, what kind of world would we like to have? What kind of world do we want to bequeath to our children, and how can we start making that? That just seems too big. So we end up with this kind of short-termism, and speed goes hand in hand with the short term, doesn't it? It's only when you slow down you start taking a long view, taking a broad look at the world around you. So I think slowing down is going to be the first step towards that macro change as well.
That's nice. And I want you to tell people about, I heard you did a slow app. I want to know what that is, and tell us about your books.
Okay. Well, the best place to find out everything about slow is my website, which is carlhonoré.com. And there's a lot of video, audio. I have a podcast called The Slow Revolution where I talk to people about slowing down and how they're doing it in different walks of life. So there's a lot of stuff on there. There's a lot of stuff about my books. I've got 3 books. First one is In Praise of Slowness. Second one is Under Pressure, which is about children and education and parenting. And the third one is called The Slow Fix, which is how to solve problems in every walk of life without falling into the trap of the quick fix. So there's lots there to sink your teeth into. I haven't actually myself created an app, but I'm working with I'm on the kind of advisory board for a slow messaging app called Jack, which is it's a lovely app. It allows you to send messages, video, whatever to somebody, and they receive it immediately, but you decide when they can open it. So you might say a week, 2 hours, a month, a year,
Oh,
10
that's
10
funny.
years. And it's just kind of playing around with the idea of delayed gratification, and it's just sort of a playful idea, and it's going down really well. It's winning all kinds of awards and getting lots of attention especially from that kind of millennial demographic. A French rapper just released his most recent hit. His most recent video went out through Jack and stuff. So it's a sign again of what I was saying before, which is that it is the young people. It is even the Silicon Valley people who are increasingly looking for ways to slow down and using technology to do that. So Jack is one example. There's video games now, or people coming up with video games which are sort of slow, where you make one move a day or something, right? So we're moving away from everything having to be faster and faster, and we can even do it through our gadgets. And I love sending Jacks, and so I advise people to go out and download it and have some fun.
And how do you spell that?
It's just like the name. Sorry, it's Jack.
Cool. I want to check that out.
Jack. If you took Jack, just Google Jack Messaging or Jack Media or something like that. I don't know. Come up.
Cool. So do you think people are ready to slow down?
I totally do.
Yeah.
I think they're more than ready. They've been ready for a long time, and better than are people ready for slow down. Many people are already doing it, and that's so powerful, because it's scary to be the first person to step out of line, to be the first soldier to break rank. But because so many people are slowing down, because the Economist is saying slow down, because schools are helping people slow down, because Roger Federer is saying don't push your kids. It becomes easier to do. And
Yeah.
I just think it's important to remain optimistic. There are so many signs of slowness happening, and it'll happen. I mean, of course, the slow revolution probably will be slow. It's not going to happen overnight, but that's the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
It's coming. It will come. We need it, and more power to it.
That's great. I'm optimistic about it also. And I'd like to know, are you working on anything now, or I know you speak a lot, you do consulting. Is there anything you have on the coals?
Yes, I'm actually working on a new book, which is a slight departure. I'm looking at our attitudes to aging, and how in a world where we're all getting older, longer, and living longer, how the whole kind of ageist cult of youth, aversion to the very idea of growing old is just not working anymore. I guess in some ways I think that the work I did before with all the slow stuff was the basic principle there, or the thrust of that. The central message was that faster isn't always better. I think with this new book, my message is going to be that younger isn't always better. So that there are some things that get better as you get older, and it's not all a kind of downward spiral of decline and decrepitude, which is sometimes the way we think about it. You hit 30 and immediately you start getting those really depressing birthday cards saying, "Oh no, it's all downhill from here." When in fact it's a much more nuanced and mixed picture than that, and it has to be, because we're the most recent projection suggests that I just heard the other day that a kid born in London now, the average life expectancy is 100. Right, that's a long life, and if we're going to be feeling bad about growing old, being older, being the wrong side of 30, feeling ashamed and downhearted about aging from the age of 30 or whatever, 35 or wherever you draw the line, that means we could be looking at spending 7 decades feeling bad about getting older, and that's not right.
No, that's not
so
good.
That's kind of what I'm tackling in the next book.
When is that going to come out?
Hopefully next year.
Well, that's interesting. And, I live in Hollywood, so I know about this idea of aging, because here it's just everyone thinks
it's not allowed.
It's not allowed. And heaven forbid, if you have a wrinkle, you can't be on TV anymore. You're old.
Yeah.
So good. When that book comes out, maybe I can have you on the show and we can talk about it and help promote the book and let people know that it's out. That would be great.
Love to. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, and just before you go, can you leave the listeners with 3 great tips on how to begin their mindfulness of slow living?
Okay. First tip, do less. We're all chronically trying to do too much. Look at your schedule. Line everything up for the next month or week in order of importance. Least important at the bottom, most important at the top, and start cutting at the bottom. You'd be surprised how easy it is to let things go. We end up filling our schedule with fluff for no reason. Second tip, switch off. Use the red button on your gadgets. Work out when you can turn off, when you can go analog, when you can be in the real world without being distracted. So less is more when it comes to being online. And then a third tip is brings back something I talked about earlier. Try and incorporate some kind of slow ritual or activity in your daily schedule. It might be golf, might be gardening, might be knitting or whatever. Something that just vaccinates you against the virus of hurry, and ring fence it off. Make sure it's a sacred part of your week or your day at least. Something that helps you slow down and go back into the hurly-burly moments with a bit more inner calm and a bit more control over yourself.
I love that. And, even when we know it, it's so good to hear it and be reminded of it. We all need that. So lastly, just tell people how they can follow you. Your website again, Twitter, Facebook.
All of the above. Yeah. I mean, if you go to my website, which is Carl Honoré, Carl, CarlHonore, Honoré.com. And then you can, at the bottom of that page, you can go to my Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. So I do all the social media and I'm always, I'm very present there, and I talk to people about stuff that's happening in the world of slow, and people write to me and share ideas. So it's a good place to go to find out what's happening out there. So a starting point would be my website, definitely.
Perfect, Carl. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking with you today. It's a great subject, and it's something, being here, all I can say is from where I live, I know it's something that really needs to happen and is happening, but it's taking time, and I think it still has to crash a little further down. So
yeah,
thanks for all your great advice and just the good conversation and enlightening us with how to become more mindfulness of our slow living.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it immensely, and I look forward to the next time.
Yeah, great. We'll do it again when your book comes out.
Excellent. It's a deal.
Have a great day.
All the best. Thanks. The same to you.
Okay. Bye-bye. So what'd you guys think of that one? I hope you liked it. But more than anything, I hope that it makes you think twice about the way you're currently living. I believe we all can make positive changes to improve the quality of our life instead of just thinking about the end result. There are, of course, some things in life that have a deadline or that need to get done and are not something you may really enjoy. But we all have free will, and I believe if you're not happy with what you're doing, then you need to take action or begin to take action to change the situation. We're not born in a trap. We can be born into circumstances, but once we become able to live on our own, we need to learn the power of making choices that allow us to be happy and create a life that we do want. I think being aware of slow living will make you choose something that has more quality today than maybe you would have chosen yesterday before you heard Carl. It's good to put things in our mind that make us reflect and look at our lives, don't you think? We should all be trying to be our best selves so we can do the best work in the world collectively to enjoy our lives here, because the planet is an amazing, beautiful place, and so many never live a life they love or work a job they love. It's sad, really. So think long and deep about today's show, you guys. My favorite thing that Carl said today, well, there were many, but let me just tell you the one that stands out in my mind. When he said that we should be living a life so that when we're old, we can look back and feel fulfilled and happy about the life we have lived, That's so true. To feel happy can mean so many things. I'm sure many think that it's about having money, but many of you know millionaires that are miserable. I knew a lot of them on the tour. And then there's some people that have no money and they have lots of love and joy and happiness in their life. So to me, money is not the answer. Although it's important to have some money to feel less stress and have some freedom, it doesn't bring you happiness. Money can still be a trap, but it's about being able to sit with yourself and really think about what is important to you in your life and what kind of life do you really want to live and what kind of person do you really want to be. I always say that giving or helping others is a way to get so much back. We all should be offering service to someone or some charity or group or to some passion that we believe in, because I believe when you serve others, you reap rewards 1,000,000 times greater for sure. So now, my favorite peoples, take a deep breath, relax, and go walk in nature today for 15 minutes, or take a bath. And if all you can do is close your eyes while you're on a bus or riding in a car, please not if you're the driver though, at least not until we get those cars that drive themselves. But if that's all you can do, then just close your eyes and take a few deep, slow breaths. And as you breathe out, you say to yourself, I'm letting go of all the speed and stress. And when you inhale, you say, I'm bringing in peace, gratitude, and love for all the goodness that I have in life. And do this for 15 minutes or 5 if that's all you have. We all have so much to be grateful for. And when we live slower with more quality, we can realize how much we have to be grateful for every day. And that itself will bring us joy. And on that warm and wonderful note, I'm going to leave you guys because I'm pretty sure you guys know what time it is. It's time to say goodbye. Ta-ta for now, or at least until next Wednesday. Have a wonderful week filled with many joyous, slow moments. Vidal has spoken. Remember, you heal with a plant-powered diet, homeopathy, and detoxing. Of course. Peace. Be healthy. Be free. Live life.